Could Samantha Maxis' fate have already been shown to us in Modern Warfare Zombies and we just overlooked it due to being bait and switched with her in the past, such as when we saw the entity for the first time and likening the silhouette to that of Samantha Maxis, which was clearly Treyarch's intention, only to later find out that it was merely an offspring of her. I believe that Samantha Maxis is not only fated to not be rescued and die at the end of Black Ops 6 Zombies, but to end up becoming part of our greatest foe yet in the Dark Ether story. Or rather, that she already has. All of that and more will be explained in this theory video, so stay tuned. This theory began for me when I was looking back at some of my prior videos on Samantha Maxis. The most recent few, especially. Lots of my recent Samantha Maxis-centric content has really focused on the s.a.m AI, and only really used the real Samantha as a vehicle to discuss how her prior characterization would affect the s.a.m AI's current personality. The tendency to talk about the s.a.m AI more is natural. She's the far more active character in the storyline at the moment. However, I think because of this, the actual Samantha Maxis has kind of gone to the wayside, causing us to glance over some hints that I feel, when putting this together, seem to clearly be teasing a specific fate for Samantha Maxis. So let's go back to the last time we really discussed Samantha. In a prior video, which I'll link on screen and in the description if you want to watch for more detail on these ideas, after you are done with this video, I discussed potential identities for the unheard ally that speaks to Dr. Pericles Panos throughout the Liberty Falls map's quest. One of the more intriguing possibilities for the possibility of Panos' mysterious ally is none other than the real Samantha Maxis. When we break down the clues, Samantha perfectly fits every criterion Panos describes. They must have gone to university, they must have been trapped in the Dark Ether for some time, they know about Richtofen but don't necessarily hate him, they have friends outside of the Dark Ether, they are intelligent enough to build the SDG, they are powerful enough to assist Panos in killing other Janus scientists. Samantha Maxis fulfills all of these requirements. She's been in the Dark Ether since the Cold War storyline, and Panos' mention of friends outside of the Dark Ether could refer to Weaver and the rest of the Terminus crew, Samantha's once closest allies. She also has a well-documented history with Richtofen, although she doesn't harbour the same hatred towards him as many others might. Their intertwined histories and childhood would likely inspire emotions far more complex. I went more into these potential feelings in my breakdown of Destroy Something Beautiful, which again, I'll link on screen and in the description if you want to check out after you're done with this video. Samantha's time at Heidelberg University accounts for her intelligence and ability to help Panos with the SDG's construction. Finally, Panos' trust in the person's promises, especially when he says, "It worked, just like you said it would," is consistent with Samantha's history of being resourceful and reliable. Samantha seems like the most obvious answer, and in that prior video we went over the potential ramifications of that, but eventually leaned into the conclusion that it's probably the s.a.m AI impersonating the real Samantha and tricking Panos into doing her will, just as she is the strike team, lying about the whereabouts of Richtofen, and the fact that she is the reason for the outbreaks. Now though, I don't necessarily agree with that conclusion as much anymore, but big question is, regardless of whether Panos is working for the real Samantha or the s.a.m AI, he will likely play an integral role at the Mansion or Janus Towers DLC maps. We know he refers to the backstabbers at Janus Towers, and obviously he needs to meet some friends, which are probably the Terminus crew, so he's probably going to play an integral role in the conclusion and a role in whatever Samantha or the s.a.m AI potentially wants with the Sentinel artifact or whatever is going on here. I think Janus Towers makes the most sense for where he will appear, with Mansion focusing on Richtofen, but maybe we'll get some radios from Panos there, setting up the stage for the Janus Towers map afterwards. Recently, in a video discussing Ava Jansen and how she may be a pivotal piece in a new cycle Richtofen is setting up, we again discussed Samantha Maxis a bit, not just in the context of her being the mother of Ava Jansen, though. Rather, we also pointed out that it's very likely her arm that yanks Ava Jansen into the Dark Ether through the mirror. While the arm inside the jumper does look like hers, and Ava Jansen even says "mother" as she approaches the mirror, and the purple jumper matches the last time we saw her when she sacrificed herself on the Forsaken, there's one problem here. Just before this happens, we are shown the identity of the person who is messing with the mirror from within the Dark Ether. And it is seemingly not Samantha Maxis, it is instead our first look at one of the Shadowsmiths, seemingly a being made of pure darkness or prima materia, and who this is likely the setup and our first look at the main villain who wants to restore the original character's essence for COD 2025 Black Ops 7 Zombies. It makes sense, to be honest. Prima materia in liquid, almost gaseous form would snake and weave as it caused outbreaks during a trial. When the s.a.m AI gains power over the Dark Ether, it too creates this purple mist that snakes in a similar regard. And the same can be said too for when Victor Zakhaev chucks the vial to start the outbreak in Modern Warfare Zombies. Maybe it's purple because red/orange is prima materia, blue is element 115, that's since returned, and maybe through some time distortion the two elements could smash together to create purple. Although we have seen Ethereum in almost practically every colour, the same with element 115 throughout the storyline, despite 115 being shifted to blue since when Blundell took over. It's really unknown right now, but we do see prima materia pods in the Dark Ether Church on Liberty Falls and the Nexus on the Tomb, so prima materia seems to originate from the realm, or even potentially 115, Ethereum and prima materia are all different forms of the same Dark Ether material. Who knows, but the new The Tomb lore does seem to suggest that the Sentinel artifacts were made in the Dark Realm itself, and potentially its creators, the Nine, could have even been Dark Ether gods, with Cortifex being involved in handing the Staff of Ra to the Egyptians. Prima materia from Latin to English translates to first matter. Could it be the very first substance of the universe itself, back when the first one was around? Or the very substance, the first substance and the only substance left of the collapse of the old multiverse? It's rotting, dying ash, which is why prima materia looks like this moldy, rotten substance and is often depicted as like fungi, as Nikolai plunged the old multiverse, explaining how the Shadowsmiths could be made of it, the Shadow Realm, and is very similar to how we see Victus and the others fade into the Dark Ether. Potentially they melt and collapse into prima materia, explaining how the Shadowsmiths could be made of it, and this would explain as to why prima materia can be used to build and create everything, if it is indeed made up of everything that the prior multiverse encapsulated. And the Shadowsmiths also seem to resemble the Shadow Man. Potentially, they are some sort of remnant of the Shadow Man/Monty being plunged into the Dark Ether and turns them into this new villain. Regardless of whether prima materia is the first matter of the multiverse itself or only the new universe being plunged, it's important and I believe is key to the real Samantha Maxis. The entity warned us that if we managed to defeat it, stronger and far more malignant entities in the Dark Ether would begin to be able to sense Ava, and warned,
"He is searching for you. The Shadowsmiths will take you."
Yet, again, when Ava is taken through the mirror, the hand that grabs her is quite likely to be the hand of Samantha Maxis, still in the same clothes she journeyed inside the Dark Ether with. Her voice is also part of the choir that calls out for Ava from the mirror.
Are you there? Ava!
And it seems Ava managed to recognize her without having ever heard her voice before. But how can these two things both be true? How can it be both Samantha and the Shadowsmiths? The question has scratched at my mind anytime I tried to figure out exactly what happened in the Modern Warfare Zombies, and it's a contradiction I've yet to be able to reconcile. Previously I was just thinking, what if the Shadowsmiths have just cloned Samantha Maxis, as we know the Dark Ether has cloning abilities and is using her clone as a pawn, especially when we've been bait and switched with Samantha Maxis many times before. Until recently, that is. On second thought, coming at this question in an entirely different frame of mind. What if these two statements, the Shadowsmiths took Ava and Samantha Maxis took Ava, aren't necessarily contradictions? What if it was a Shadowsmith that took Ava, but that Shadowsmith was Samantha Maxis? Well, how could this be? Let's take a look back at what we know about Samantha's ultimate fate. What actually happened to her? All we know for sure from Ravenov's time in Modern Warfare Zombies is that Requiem were ultimately not successful in their mission to save something.
You were part of Requiem.
Yes.
What happened to them?
Maxis sacrificed herself to end the outbreak. We promised we would find a way to rescue her. And when we failed, it was A blow. Some of us took it very hard. We vowed never to let this happen again.
But what exactly does that mean? We can certainly make a confident assumption that they never managed to pull Samantha from the Dark Ether, sure, and rescue her. Their mission was that, and failing at their mission surely means she remained in there. But past that, what exactly happens when you are left there? Well, let's take a look at what the s.a.m AI answers to that question when Grey poses it during the tomb.
If the Sentinel artifact works like you promised, tell me the Maxis we bring back will be my Maxis.
Impossible to predict how the Dark Ether may have changed her. I only have data on what it did to Zykov.
Here, Grey asks out loud if the s.a.m that the Sentinel artifacts brought back would even be the Samantha she knew. And the s.a.m AI says it's hard to say, that her only observable example of long-term Dark Ether exposure would be that of Zykov, the Forsaken. So let's do just that. Use Zykov as an example of what long exposure can do. We know Zykov upon entry to the Dark Ether was merely human, and slowly, through Dark Ether exposure and the consumption of his enemies, he grew in power and became the sole ruler of the Dark Ether.
You will not consume this world! Not as long as I am here!
Sam, whatever you're thinking of doing, don't do it!
I'm not a bad person, Weaver. I am a good soul. I know what I have to do. I'm sorry. This is the only way.
He spent 40 Earth years inside the Dark Ether, and according to him, that was 4 centuries inside that realm, so 400 years.
40 Earth years. 4 Dark Ether centuries.
Assuming the same for s.a.m, she would have gone into the Dark Ether in June 4th, 1985, the day the Forsaken takes place. While we don't know exactly when the tomb takes place, it's at most a day after Citadel Day More, which was February 25th, 1991. That puts the ballpark estimate for s.a.m's time in the Dark Ether during Black Ops 6 at around 6 years. This would translate to roughly 60 years if her timescale is the same as Zykov's, but there is plenty of evidence to suggest the timescale is different for different people or different places and times in the Dark Ether, as well as depending on the psyche and psychology of where people's heads are at when they actually are in the realm, so we can't guarantee that necessarily. It seems time passes at different rates depending on where you are in the realm, due to it having different bubbles and ripples, and time is not linear there. Frankly though, we can't really guarantee much of a process would be the same, as we've left out a key difference here. Samantha Maxis did not go into the Dark Ether as a mere mortal human as Zykov did. Yes, her time in Firebase C did reawaken these powers, but the emphatic syllable in reawaken here is the re. These are powers she had left over from her time in the MPD, battling the forces of the Dark Ether in the classic Ether story when she used to be in control of the zombies. She had these powers as we see in Alpha Omega's intro and ending cutscenes. She has held omnipotence in her hands before, being a literal god when in control of the Ether. And the psychic reawakening in her was only a return to what she had been previously capable of. This puts her rate of mutation, as well as her rate of growth of power, into question. It's quite possible, in fact quite likely, that she is being changed by the Dark Ether much more rapidly than Zykov ever was. Her original stint inside the Dark Ether inside Firebase Z was not long at all, a mere matter of days, but to her it was months, and it awoke her abilities in her that had remained hidden her whole life. Imagine how much could reawaken with 60 Earth years, but as one's power grows within the dimension, they continue to lose themselves. We've learned that the Dark Ether slowly strips its inhabitants of their memories and self, transforming them into one of its creatures. But what happens when this something is far too powerful to be able to be turned into a simple zombie or mimic? What happens when a being of great psychic power is absorbed by the Dark Ether completely? When Samantha first went in there, she experienced amnesia and she lost herself, confusing her child self with her adult self, and everything became a blur. She lost her identity, as the Easter egg song on Firebase C describes.
I am losing myself, even if you don't know it. I'm losing my way. You should hope, maybe pray. I don't show it.
and not knowing what her purpose is. I propose this. What if Samantha, this entire time, has indeed been dying to the Dark Ether since the ending of Black Ops Cold War, but because of how deep stopping the Forsaken has sent her, she is slowly being whittled away by the Dark Ether, her memories and identity being stripped as she grows in power. As we've discussed with Eddie's family and having to restore their memories and souls, if someone loses the self, loses all identity, their body is nothing more than matter. And this matter, without a soul or mind of its own in the Dark Ether, perhaps too merges with the Dark Ether itself. This merging of matter in the Dark Ether would likely look something like a person's body becoming the physical embodiment of the Dark Ether, the genetic makeup of everything we see inside it. Prima Materia. If we actually look at her arm as she grabs Ava, her flesh looks to be rotting, and it even has this smoke coming from it like Prima Materia. She almost looks zombified, almost as if she's on fire but melting at the same time. Her flesh is peeling back and bleeding. And what if this has happened before? What if this physical Prima Materia being, completely enthralled by the Dark Ether that we are discussing here, is exactly what a Shadowsmith is? Looking back at Modern Warfare Zombies ending now, that we know Prima Materia is a thing in the story and seems to originate from the Dark Ether realm itself, almost makes this obvious. The body of the Shadowsmith we see is all black in colour, just as Prima Materia is often depicted as, with similar smoke effects surrounding them that we see from Prima Materia in the Chaos story. Maybe that's why Ava hears her mother, Samantha, in a choir of what we hear as many voices. Perhaps many people over the years could have been absorbed into this army of Shadowsmith personas. Maybe some of these voices could even be the voices and echoes or souls of the Requiem heads who are now deceased. As they are dead in the real world, powering these Ethereum canisters, their memories could still remain inside of the Dark Ether, and the hallucination that Ava saw of all of them zombified haunting her with purple glowing eyes could actually be what they are now inside of the Dark Ether, zombified, mutated and corrupted, just as potentially the real Samantha Maxis is. This could be a foresight of what has happened to Sam. Perhaps that's why we hear the name as plural in the subtitles, yet we only see one. It is capable of changing forms between many different ones, and all of those hallucinations we saw could be an amalgamation of the Shadowsmiths, in fact, because many people have written off many of the Modern Warfare Zombies, in particular this hallucination one, as just seeming like cool cutscenes but don't actually have any narrative importance. But what if it actually does, like I've explained? And this is supposed to be foreshadowing what happens, and this could be the fate of the Requiem heads, souls, now inside of the Dark Realm. Or maybe each person absorbed becomes a different Shadowsmith. Obviously, like stated, we do still see a hand that looks like Sam's grab Ava after all, and this could potentially be a different entity to the one wearing the hat, so there could be many Shadowsmiths here. Maybe even the Requiem heads could now be Shadowsmiths as well, and maybe they were trying to warn Ava in that hallucination. It's a bit unclear right now. This would now pave the way for a buttery smooth connection between all three titles: Modern Warfare Zombies, Black Ops 6, and COD 2025 Black Ops 7. We've continuously struggled to imagine how the Shadowsmiths will suddenly become relevant in Mansion or Janus Towers in Liberty Falls to explain their presence in COD 2025, as Modern Warfare Zombies gave us essentially nothing, and it's very unlikely they just appear as villains with no setup prior to COD 2025, so they have to be set up during the end of this game, surely. So far, we've had settled on the idea that they were waiting in the wings, and once we take down the SAM AI and defeat her, by extension Zykov, who is probably serving as the battery, inside the core of the SAM Sophia, the Dark Ether would have no Archon if it gets defeated and leave a power vacuum for them to attempt to fill. But what if it's a tad more direct than that? What if the person that Panos was talking to back at launch actually was the real Samantha Maxis, and his dialogue referencing that fact that something is clearly wrong with whoever he is talking to?
One day in the Dark Ether and I feel like I'm losing my mind. Am I going to end up like you?
This seems to hint at exactly what we were just theorizing about. He could be worried that he could turn into what Samantha is, and I believe Samantha's body was or is transforming into a Shadowsmith as her physical form reverts and melts into Prima Materia, rotting to the core. Now, whether at this point she is already evil and has already become a Shadowsmith, or is actually still the good Sam, either way, by the end of this game, we know that Weaver and the Terminus crew will not save her. They will fail. They will either lose the artifact and entirely or use it to save Eddie's family, and not use it to restore the real Samantha, as the s.a.m AI is lying about that goal and that promise to them. This means that once her fate was sealed after Black Ops 6, she would essentially be absorbed into this amalgam of memories and people that are the Shadowsmiths, a hive mind in much the same way the Apothicons were, just as when Ava sees this hallucination of all the characters, they are whispering to her as many voices in a chorus. And potentially we will meet Panos in the Janus Towers map, and he could be working for the Shadowsmiths through Samantha Maxis, or potentially even other Shadowsmiths are talking to him if this is true. Another idea is the s.a.m AI is being corrupted or being spoken to by the Shadowsmiths and taking her over. That is one idea as well, but I really do think from all of the inklings and the radio that we've gotten on the tomb about her wanting a soul, that she wants something separate to the Shadowsmiths, she wants something for herself, a body, a life. But how does this then transition into COD 2025's plot? That, my friends, is the key to this theory. So far, the transition to what we know of COD 2025 Zombies' plot seems very random and difficult to understand with the context we have now. We know that the Shadowsmiths will be attempting to take over with the goal of taking the essence and restoring the original characters to use them to restore the old multiverse. As random as this has always seemed, this theory all of a sudden makes it make sense very easily. It answers most of the lingering questions I had, at least. For instance, why had the Shadowsmiths never done this previously? Why wait until now? And how did they even discover the true scope of the prior multiverse? No one had ever in the history of the Dark Ether discovered the true scope of the prior multiverse. How did they? And where in the world would they have learned of the original characters anyways? Simple, really. That's the entire reason Samantha being absorbed was so important. Her memories are valuable. She could have potentially restored her memories after curing her amnesia and may now remember the original characters and playing with Eddie in the house with the toys of them, may remember everything about afterwards, with seeing her father be killed, with meeting the original characters, Ultimus and Primus, face to face, with seeing them perish and die, with her having to shoot Nikolai with the welling at the end of the story. And once the Shadowsmiths have access to her memories and can know everything that she once knew, potentially even deeper memories than she had access to herself, considering that Kraft used MK Ultra brainwashing stuff which managed to awaken Eddie Richthofen's memories, this suggests that they are buried in the subconscious. But once they learn what she knows, they now have knowledge of all of this. And the sudden resurgence of these classic Ether themes and characters are not just by random chance. They are triggered by the death of Samantha Maxis. Obviously, Samantha has been recasted. Julie Nathanson is no longer voicing her. So maybe the s.a.m AI will get defeated in this game, as well as the real Samantha. Or maybe Samantha Maxis, the real one, could be a Shadowsmith and set up as the main villain potentially on the last map if we've already defeated the AI of her. Or even in COD 2025, could we see a classic storyline theme where Samantha Maxis is a main villain working for the Shadowsmiths? Or even on that final Janus Towers map, if Panos does something to allow her and the Shadowsmiths to take over. After all, the s.a.m AI mainframe in the tomb's ending states, nothing is lost if the memory remains. Both Richthofen and Samantha Maxis probably remember the original characters, and both could be used by the Shadowsmiths to try and restore their echoes, their souls, back to life. And we play as them from within the Dark Ether, fighting against the Shadowsmiths to stop them from restoring them properly to life, because they would just be their echoes. They wouldn't be their real lives, in the flesh, in the real world. They would just be inside that realm, guarding it, sentinels protecting it from within, that I've explored more in a recent video. Forever locked in battle to keep the real world safe and stop the multiverse from coming back. This way it wouldn't undo their deaths and tag to totem, they would still be dead and cleansed from existence. We would just be playing as echoes of them, memories of the past, which Samantha and Richthofen have. And in the tomb's ending, when we see into Sam's mainframes, there's the writings such as "She did this," "Do not trust her," which are the blood writings from Liberty Falls, which I previously did take to mean that the s.a.m AI was the one who wrote these, but it doesn't actually make much sense. What if it's actually coming from the real Samantha Maxis trying to warn the characters or the Janus people on Liberty Falls that the s.a.m AI is the one responsible? And she could have actually emboldened Panos if he was working for her to kill the Janus scientists and then write these warnings in blood. It could very well be that the s.a.m AI wants to destroy and kill the real Samantha Maxis out of jealousy and the fact she's not able to bond with the crew like she was, and she'll never be a replacement for the real Samantha, and she hates that Samantha is able to get the life that she wants and will never mean as much to the rest of them as Samantha was. And we also see Eddie is a liar. which is interesting as well if it is coming from the real Samantha or even the s.a.m, since they share memories, since Samantha was involved in the death of his family. And at some point this revelation is going to hit the rest of the Terminus crew. Obviously Weaver already knows, or maybe he partially knows, but he didn't really know he was targeting Richtofen, and he hasn't put that connection together, although I find that unlikely. Regardless, at some point the rest of the characters are going to learn of this, and maybe this is Samantha trying to tell the people not to trust Eddie because really they shouldn't be trusting her. And she fears Richtofen or someone else could reveal what actually happened on that dark day, and she doesn't want them to find out and lose trust in her. And in fact, we've recently had huge leaks about a ton of cut content for Black Ops 2, and initially there was going to be a plot line where when Richtofen was in control of the MPD and the Ether, he would hear many voices of corruption and many entities in there, such as the Shadow Man that we eventually find out about later, but apparently he would see a big bad in the Dark Ether that scares Richtofen, leading him to helping the players out and wanting to escape the Dark Ether. This was going to be Black Ops 2's plot and his motivation there, but this all got cancelled. But now this cut idea could be reinterpreted as the Shadowsmiths and could be a similar plot to him now being plunged in the Dark Ether by the s.a.m. Whilst he's stumbling around in there, he may come across the Shadowsmiths and he could warn us against them, or by the time we eventually get him out, if we do get him out, he could be so scared of what he saw within and warns us of this big impending threat, this looming doom. And to be honest, regardless of whether it's Sam, even some sort of new version of Richtofen, given the parallels to the SDG and the dark mechanism from Blood of the Dead, I think whoever was influencing Panos has to be a pawn of the Shadowsmiths, given the fact that he steals the essence, which is the very thing we know the Shadowsmiths want to do. And he could be trying to falter our plans in the future on Mansion/Janus Towers to allow the Shadowsmiths to take a hold. Or in fact, he could even help us in getting what we want, because if we end up defeating the s.a.m, it may allow said Shadowsmiths to take hold. Alternatively, the Shadowsmiths, like I mentioned earlier, could be what Dr. Monty or the Shadow Man has even become if they got plunged into the Dark Ether and corrupted into these beings, which could be another reason for how they remember the original characters and why they even want to restore the multiverse in the first place, since obviously they were the ones originally tied to it, along with the original characters. Alternatively, if Samantha Maxis and or the Shadowsmiths, whether she's working for them or not, are not the ones to bring back the original characters, it could alternatively be Richtofen who does so himself. He may restore his family with the Sentinel artifact and get his happy life, but in doing so, something messes up with the Dark Ether, everything goes wrong, the Terminus crew get plunged in there, which is why they die due to prolonged Dark Ether exposure, and so due to Richtofen and or Samantha's memories of the original characters, the Dark Ether manifests them to stop the Shadowsmiths from taking over, or Richtofen manifests them from his memories, allowing the heroes in his stories to finally be real, to protect the realm from within the Dark Ether, whilst he gets to live his happy life in the real world, explaining the rumored 8-player mode for COD 2025 Zombies, which could be the Requiem characters inside of the Dark Ether fighting alongside the echoes of the original characters, battling against the Shadowsmiths or potentially any other Dark Ether entities or the real Samantha, etc. inside the realm. But that's everything I wanted to discuss for you today. Could the Archon even play into this? Could the Shadowsmiths have gotten the power of the construct? Who knows? But plenty more storyline videos to come. Thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for latest and greatest Call of Duty news and information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.